All right, let's talk about something that hits home for millions of Americans, the Social Security Cost of Living Adjustment, or COLA. Today, we're going to dig into how it works, why it's so, well, controversial, and really get to the heart of the matter. Is it actually protecting the buying power of seniors? Let's dive in.
You know that feeling, all right? Especially if you're a beneficiary. You see the cost of pretty much everything going up. Groceries, gas, and oh boy, especially healthcare. And you can't help but wonder if that annual bump in your benefits is really keeping up. That exact feeling, it's at the center of a huge national debate. So before we get too deep in the weeds, let's make sure we're all on the same page. The whole idea behind the COLA is to make sure your Social Security benefits don't lose their value over time. You know, when inflation happens and your dollar just doesn't stretch as far, the COLA is supposed to give your benefits a little boost. But the real question is, how do they even figure out what that boost should be?
Well, that calculation isn't random. It's actually a very specific four-step process that the Social Security Administration uses every single year. So let's take a look at how they do it. Okay, so the whole thing really hangs on that first step. They use something called the CPI-W. The easiest way to think about it is like a big shopping basket filled with things that typical city-dwelling workers are buying. The government then tracks how much the price of that exact basket changes from one year to the next. Whatever that percentage increase is, boom, that's your COLA. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, this is exactly where the problem starts. And that brings us right to the core of this whole thing. It's basically a tale of two very, very different shopping baskets, which, as it turns out, represent two very different American lives.
Here it is, the fundamental mismatch. The CPI-W, the index that determines everything, is based on what urban wage earners and clerical workers are spending their money on. But that group, it's only about, say, 29 to 32% of the whole US population. And their financial priorities, where their money actually goes, are just not the same as a retiree's.
And boy, does that difference become crystal clear when you start comparing their spending. For your average worker, sure, healthcare is an expense, but it's a relatively small slice of their budget pie. But for retirees, it is a massive and rapidly growing expense. It means they spend a much, much larger chunk of their income on medical costs. So what does this actually mean? It means that when healthcare costs go through the roof, it hits a senior's budget way harder than a worker's. But because the COLA is tied to the worker's basket, it just doesn't fully register the kind of inflation that seniors are actually living through. And over the years, that disconnect really adds up, causing a real loss of buying power.
This leads us to what seems like a pretty logical solution, one that a lot of advocates have been pushing for. It's called the CPI-E, the Consumer Price Index for the Elderly. It's an experimental index that was created for this exact purpose, to measure the costs that seniors are actually facing by tracking a basket of goods based on their spending habits.
So, if we have a tool that seems to be a better fit, why not just, make the switch? It sounds like a simple fix. But as you've probably guessed, it's not nearly that easy. This has kicked off a huge debate with some really major financial consequences.
The main argument for switching is pretty straightforward, because the CPI-E gives more weight to things like healthcare, which, let's be honest, tend to get more expensive faster. It would almost certainly lead to bigger annual COLAs for everyone receiving benefits.
And hey, the numbers back this up. If you look at the data over the years, the CPI-E has consistently grown a little bit faster than the CPI-W. Now, a small annual difference might not sound like much, but over a decade or two, that can add up to thousands and thousands of dollars in benefits, which would much better reflect the real costs seniors are dealing with.
But, and this is a huge but, here comes the powerful counterargument. Bigger payments going out every year means a Social Security trust fund drains faster. And considering that the fund is already facing a pretty serious long-term shortfall, this is something that makes policymakers really, really nervous.
And look, this isn't just some wild guess. This is a real risk that's been highlighted in the Social Security Administration's own analysis. The big fear is that in trying to make things fairer for today's retirees, we might end up threatening the stability of the entire system for our kids and grandkids.
And just when you think it couldn't get more complicated, the plot thickens. It turns out that this proposed solution, the CPI-E, is far from perfect itself. In fact, it comes with its own list of pretty significant problems that we just can't ignore.
You see, the CPI-E is still officially labeled as experimental, and for good reason. For one, it's based on a much smaller sample of people, which makes it less reliable. It also doesn't really account for the specific ways seniors shop, like using senior discounts. Because of these kinds of flaws, critics argue it's just not sturdy enough to be the basis for managing trillions of dollars in benefit payments.
But maybe one of the biggest hurdles for the CPI-E, especially with its heavy focus on healthcare, boils down to a really tough economic question. How do you actually measure the value of getting better medicine?
I mean, think about it like this. If a new drug comes out that costs twice as much as the old one, but it's 3 times more effective at treating a disease, is that just inflation? Or are you paying a new price for a much better product? It's incredibly hard to separate a simple price hike from a real improvement in quality. And if you get that wrong, you could seriously mess up the inflation numbers. So, where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us staring at a really complex, unsolved equation that has no easy answers.
And this really is the fundamental trade-off, isn't it? On one hand, you have the desire for more accuracy, for a COLA that truly reflects what seniors are spending. But on the other hand, you have the massive challenge of keeping the entire system financially sound for generations to come, all while knowing that the tools we have to measure this stuff aren't perfect.
Ultimately, this is the question at the very heart of the COLA Conundrum. There's no simple right answer here. Every potential path forward involves a really difficult choice between competing and totally valid priorities. It's a debate that really forces us to decide what we value most. Thanks for digging into this with us.
The Social Security Cost of Living Adjustment, COLA, is designed to protect seniors' benefits from inflation. Still, it falls short due to its reliance on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, CPI-W. This index, based on the spending habits of a younger working population, does not adequately reflect the financial realities of retirees who face significantly higher healthcare costs. The mismatch results in COLA increases that fail to keep pace with the inflation seniors experience, eroding their purchasing power over time. While the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, CPI-E, has been proposed as a more accurate alternative, its adoption is complicated by its experimental status, smaller sample size, and inability to account for factors like senior discounts, raising concerns about its reliability for managing massive benefit payments. Switching to the CPI-E could lead to larger COLA increases, better aligning benefits with seniors' actual expenses, particularly in healthcare, but it comes with significant trade-offs. Larger payments would accelerate the depletion of the already strained Social Security Trust Fund, threatening the program's long-term sustainability for future generations. Additionally, measuring inflation accurately is challenging, especially when distinguishing between price increases and improvements in quality, such as more effective but costly medications. The COLA Conundrum thus presents a complex dilemma, balancing fairness for today's retirees with the financial stability of the system, all while grappling with imperfect tools for measuring inflation. This ongoing debate underscores the need to weigh competing priorities without a clear or simple solution.